Why are you running? I'll race you to the corner, Ellen. Anne Mary adjusted the thick leather pack on her back so that her school bags balanced evenly. Ready? She looked at her best friend. Ellen made a face. No, she said, laughing. You know I can't beat you. My legs aren't as long. Can't we just walk like civilized people? She was a stocky 10-year-old, unlike lanky Anne Mary. We have to practice for the athletic meet on Friday. I know I'm going to win the girls' race this week. I was second last week, but I've been practicing every day. Come on, Ellen, Anne Mary pleaded, eyeing the distance to the next corner of the Copenhagen street. Please. Ellen hesitated, then nodded and circled her own rucksack of books against her shoulders. Oh, all right. Ready? Go! Shouted Anne Mary, and the two girls were off, racing along the residential sidewalk. Anne Mary's silver blonde hair flew behind her, and Ellen's dark pigtails bounced against her shoulders. Wait for me, wailed little Kissy, riding left behind. But the two older girls weren't listening. Anne Mary outdistanced her friend quickly, even though one of her shoes came untied as she sped along the street called Osterbrogade, past the small shops and cafes of her neighborhood here in northeast Copenhagen. Laughing, she skirted an elderly lady in black who carried a shopping bag made of string. A young woman pushing a baby in a carriage moves aside to make way. The corner was just ahead. Anne Mary looked up, panting, but as she reached the corner, her laughter stopped. Her heart seemed to skip a beat. Halt! A soldier ordered in a stern voice. The German word was familiar as it was frightening. Anne Mary had heard it often enough before, but it had never been directed at her until now. Behind her, Ellen also slowed and stopped. Behind back, little Kirsty was plodding along, her face in pout, because the girls hadn't waited for her. Anne Mary stared up. There were two of them. That made two helmets, two sets of cold eyes glaring at her, and four tall, skinny, shiny boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, blocking her path to home. It meant two rifles gripped in the hands of the soldiers. She stared at the rifles first. Then finally, she looked up to the face of the soldier who had ordered her to halt. Why are you running? A hoarse voice asked. His Danish was poor, very poor. 3 years, Anne Mary thought with contempt. 3 years they've been in our country and still they can't speak our language. I'm racing with my friends, she answered politely. We have races at school every Friday, and I wanted to do well, so I... Don't talk so much, she told herself. Just answer them, that's all. She glanced back. Ellen was motionless on the sidewalk, a few yards behind her. Farther back, Kirsty was still sulking, walking slowly toward the corner. Nearby, a woman had come to the door of the shop and was standing silent, watching. One of the soldiers, the taller one, moved toward her. Anne Mary recognized him as one she had Ellen called in whispers the giraffe, because his height and his long neck that extended from his stuffed collar. He and his partner were always on this corner. He prodded the corner of her backpack with the stock of his rifle. Anne Mary trembled. What is in here? He asked loudly. From the corner of her eye, she saw the shopkeeper move quietly back into the doorway, out of sight. School books, she answered truthfully. Are you a good student? The soldier asked. He seemed to be sneering. Yes. What's your name? Anne Mary Johnson. Your friend, is she a good student too? He was looking behind her at Ellen, who hadn't moved. Anne Mary looked back too, and saw that Ellen's face, usually so rosy-cheeked, was pale, and her dark eyes were wide. She nodded to the soldier. Better than me? What's her name? Ellen. And who is this? Looking to Anne Mary's side. Kirsty had appeared there suddenly, scowling at everyone. My little sister, she reached down for Kitty's hand, but Kitty, always stubborn, refused it and put her hands on her hips defiantly. The soldiers reached down and stroked her sister's short, tangled curls. Standing still, Kirsty and Mary ordered silently, praying that somehow the obstinate 5-year-old would receive the message. But Kirsty reached up and pushed the soldier's hand away. Don't. she said loudly. Both soldiers began to laugh. They spoke to each other in rapid German that Aunt Mary couldn't understand. She's pretty, like my own girl, the tall one said with a more pleasant voice. Aunt Mary tried to smile politely. Go home, all of you. Go study your spellbooks. And don't run. You look like hold drums when you run. The two soldiers turned away. Quickly, Aunt Mary reached down again and grabbed her little sister's hand before Kirsty could resist. Hurrying the little girl along, she rounded the corner. In a moment, Ellen was beside her. They walked quickly, not speaking, with Kirsty between them, toward the large apartment building where both families lived. When they were almost home, Ella whispered suddenly, I am so scared. Me too, Aunt Mary whispered back. As they turned to enter the building, both girls looked straight ahead, toward the door. They did it purposely so that they would not catch eyes or the attention of two more soldiers who stood with their guns on the corner as well. Kirsty turned ahead of them through the door, chattering about the pictures she was bringing home from kindergarten to show Mama. For Kirsty, the soldiers were simply part of the landscape, something that had always been there, in every corner, unimportant as lampposts, throughout her remembered life. Are you going to tell your mother? Ellen asked. Aunt Mary asked. They trudged together up the stairs. No, I'm not. My mother will be so upset. No, I won't either. Mama will probably scold me for running on the street. She said goodbye to Ellen on the second floor, where Ellen lived, and continued to the third, practicing her mind in a cheerful greeting for her mother, a smile, a description of today's spelling test, in which she had done well. But it was too late. Kirsty had gone there first. He poked Aunt Mary's book bag with his gun, and he grabbed my hair. Kirsty was chattering as she took off her sweater in the center of the apartment living room. But I wasn't scared. Aunt Mary was, and Ellen too, but not me. Miss Johnson rose quickly from her chair by the window where she'd been sitting. Miss Rosen, Ellen's mother, was there too, in the opposite chair. We were having coffee together, and they did many afternoons. Of course, it wasn't real coffee, though the mother still called that. Having coffee, there had been no coffee in Copenhagen since the beginning of the nasty occupation. Not even any real tea. The mother sipped at hot water flavored with herbs. Aunt Mary, what happened? What if Christy's talking about? Her mother asked anxiously. Where's Ellen? Miss Rosen had a frightened look. Ellen is in your apartment. She didn't realize you were here, Aunt Mary replied. Don't worry, it wasn't anything. It was just two soldiers who stand on the corner of Oster Brigade. You've seen them. You all know the tall one with the long neck, the one who looks like a silly giraffe. She told her mother and Miss Rosen of the incident, trying to make it sound humorous and unimportant. But their uneasy looks didn't change. I slapped his hat and shouted at him. No, she didn't, Mama, and Aunt Mary reassured her mother. She's exaggerating, as she always does. Miss Johnson moved to the window and looked down the street below. The Copenhagen neighborhood was quiet. It looked the same as it always. People coming and going from the shops, children at play, and soldiers on the corner. She spoke in a low voice to Ellen's mother. They must be edgy because of the latest resistance includence. Did you read the Frank Dashi about the bombings in Hilgard and Nobro? Although she pretended it was absorbed and unpacked her school bags, Aunt Mary listened, and she knew what her mother was referring to. The Free Danes was an illegal newspaper. Peter Nelson brought it to them occasionally, carefully folded and hidden among ordinary books and papers, and Mama always burned it after she and Papa read it. But Aunt Mary heard Mama and Papa talk, sometimes at night, about the news they received that way. The news of sabotage against the Nazis, bombs hidden and exploded in the factories that produced war materials, and industrial railroad lines damaged so that goods could not be transported. She knew what resistance means. Papa had explained, and she overheard the words and asked, The resistant fighters were Danish people. No one knew who, because they were very secret, who were determined to bring harm to the Nazi however they could. They damaged the German trucks and cars, they bombed their factories. They were very brave. Sometimes they were caught and killed. We must go to speak to Ellen, Miss Rosen said. You girls walk a different way to school tomorrow. Promise me, Aunt Mary, and Ellen will promise too. We will, Miss Rosen, but what does it matter? There are German soldiers on every corner. They will remember your faces, Miss Rosen said, turning to the doorway of the hall. It is important to me to be one of the crowd, always. Be one of many. Be sure they have never had a reason to remember your face. She disappeared into the hall and closed the door behind her. He'll remember my face, Mama, Christy answered happily, because he and I look like his little girl. He said I was pretty. If he has such a pretty girl, why doesn't he go back to her like a good father? Miss Johnson muttered, stroking Christy's cheek. Why doesn't he go back to his own country? Mama, is there anything to eat? And Mary asked, hoping to take her mind away from her soldiers. Take some bread and a piece to your sister. With butter? Christy asked hopefully. No butter, her mother replied. You know that. Christy sighed as Aunt Mary went to the bread box in the kitchen. I wish I could have a cupcake, she said. A big yellow cupcake with pink frosting. Her mother laughed. For a little girl, you have a long memory. There hasn't been any butter or sugar for cupcakes in a long time. For a year at least. So when will there be cupcakes again? When the war ends, Miss Johnson said. She glanced through the window down to the street corner where the soldiers stood, their faces impassive behind the metal helmets. When the soldiers leave.